Today on Larry King Now, acclaimed actor and director Bill Paxton on his popular new miniseries.
Sometimes you get to play people, and it's not very often, that you really would like to be. And Sam Houston was a boyhood hero of mine, growing up in Texas, being steeped in the story of the Texas Revolution.
On his storied career.
To me, I think about directors that gave me the most confidence.
Who was that?
I'd have to say John Hughes, when I did Weird Science. That was the first movie I really got real notices.
Plus, and he talks of a Twister sequel.
I was promoting that a few years ago. I always felt like we left a lot on the table.
All next on Larry King Now. For over 3 decades, Hollywood has turned to Bill Paxton for his wide-ranging talent in a multitude of critically acclaimed fan favorites like Aliens, Titanic, and Apollo 13. Following successes on the small screen with leading roles in HBO's Big Love and The Hatfields and McCoys, the 4-time Golden Globe nominee is now starring in the new historical miniseries, Texas Rising. It airs Mondays at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on the History Channel, and he plays Sam Houston. How did you get this part, Sam? I feel like calling you Sam.
You can call me Sam. I will relate
You're a
to that.
Texas boy, right?
Born in Fort Worth, Texas.
Were you related to Sam Houston?
Well, there's a rumor that I am, but you know, sometimes you get to play people, and it's not very often that you really would like to be. And Sam Houston was a boyhood hero of mine, growing up in Texas, being steeped in the story of the Texas Revolution. And I had so much fun researching this part. My dad told me as a boy that we were related to Sam Houston.
In some way?
He said his mother's maiden name was Elizabeth Paxton. She was from Rockbridge County, Virginia, which is the Lexington area. And that's where a lot of my dad's family was from. But I didn't verify or really figure out exactly what the connection was till I was researching this part last year. And I came to find that we share common grandparents going back 6 generations on my dad's side.
There's a lot been written about this movie. Brendan Fraser's in it, Ray Liotta, Chris Christopherson. Now, the Texas Revolution, that occurred after the Alamo?
That was during that whole siege. The Alamo fell on March 6th, 1836. And the series deals with really, at the fall, people think, well, what happened after then? There was about a 6-week period to San Jacinto where Houston, he had an army that wasn't really an army. He had about 1,000 men. They were volunteers. He knew that they might hold up in one battle if he was lucky. So he knew he was facing an overwhelming force. You know, Santa Anna had several thousand troops with artillery. These were professional soldiers. So he kept retreating in hopes that he would find a weakness or Santa Anna would make a mistake, which he did. Santa Anna decided to split his army and try to cut off the Texas government that was trying to get to Galveston and fall back to New Orleans, where they were going to set up a temporary government out of New Orleans. He jumped ahead of his army. Sam Houston saw his chance, and they met near Houston, where it's Houston, Texas now, on the fields of San Jacinto. And Santa Anna thought, he saw that Houston was camped in the woods and said, well, he's never going to attack me. So Santa Anna decided to bide his time and wait for the rest of his army to show up. But Sam Houston and the Texans, they attacked during the siesta hour at the end of a long day. And literally, well, as the story goes, Santa Anna was literally caught with his pants down. And the Mexican army was in siesta, and the battle literally only lasted 20 minutes. But the killing went on, the reprisal killings of the massacre at the Alamo and Goliad. Houston and his officers tried to stop their men from killing the Mexican soldiers.
Does this 8 part tell you the whole story?
It goes into that. So you really see, you know, the best war movies are anti-war movies, because the first victim of any war is morality. And so the first half of the series, it seems like, oh, we're showing the, you know, the Mexican atrocities, the Mexican army atrocities that go ahead. But then when we get to San Jacinto, we see that there were just as many atrocities committed on the Texas side as well.
Let's watch a clip from Texas Rising on the History Channel.
So you're a private?
Si, senor.
Colonel Almonte. Why do your men salute him?
Regretfully, I do not know all my soldiers, sir.
That's too bad. Private Pitt, execute your prisoner.
Yes, sir.
No, Private. Put him up against a tree so his brains don't splatter.
I am Antonio Lopez de Santana.
What are you saying, Anna?
And I am Sam Houston. El Presidente General, I cannot express how glad I am to meet you. He knew he had an ace in the hole there. Santa Anna left his men in the field and to escape, but was rounded up the next day. And when Houston was able to capture him alive, he knew he had an ace in the hole because he said, this guy will do anything to keep himself alive. So now he had a bargaining chip, although all the men wanted to hang him.
How did you like playing that?
It was
How about that
fantastic.
accent?
The accent, the manners, the custom of the time. You have to remember, these men were sons of Revolutionary War veterans. These guys were born in the late 18th century. Now, this is early 1800s, 1836. You know, the weapons only shot one round. Then you had to go through a whole reloading process with the ball and the wadding and all of that. So very quickly in a combat situation, you were down to your sword. Just the costuming, the manner, the custom. You know, these.
Grew that beard?
Yeah, they got those. Calling me their
Were you
Neil Young sideburns.
Were you at a benefit for the Alamo recently with someone from the Bush family?
I was, yeah. I was there on a dais with George P. Bush.
Yeah, I know.
Jed's son, a hell of a nice guy. Gave a great speech. He's the land commissioner down there. We did an event in front of the Alamo. We gave some awards. We were there to raise money for the Alamo. And who should I get to meet there? And I'd always heard this story about Phil Collins having the biggest private collection of Alamo and Texas Revolution artifacts. And he told me the story. He said on his first tour with Genesis, they were in the Midwest and they found they had 3 days off. He said Peter Gabriel went out to San Francisco. He said, I went straight to San Antonio to visit the Alamo. He had grown up steeped in Davy Crockett and the story of the Alamo. And he's just given his whole collection to the Alamo.
Wow.
And they're trying to raise money for it.
Up next, I'll ask Bill about some exciting projects he has in store for us, and we'll take a look back at his great career right after this. We're back with Bill Paxton. He's one of the stars of Texas Rising on the History Channel. It airs Mondays at 9 Eastern, 8 Pacific. Want to get into a lot of other things. But in this cast is some of my favorite people. Love Chris Christopherson. We don't see enough of him. And what about Ray Liotta? He was here recently. You like working with him?
I loved working with Ray. He does not suffer fools gladly.
No.
he has kind of a curmudgeon attitude about things, but he's actually a really sweet guy. I told him, I said, when people see you in this, you're going to be on horseback for the rest of your career. He plays a character named Lorca, who's a fictional character, but he symbolizes what war does to a man's soul and psyche. He's a survivor. He climbs out of a pile of dead bodies at the Alamo, and he has one intent, and that is to kill Mexicans, till he has an epiphany in the course of the thing. But I tell you, with that beard and those eyes, and you see him on a horse with a saber.
Love that commercial he does for the drink.
Yeah. 1800.
All right, you have some new films coming up. You just wrapped shooting a film about a civil suit against the makers of a popular video game called Grand Theft Auto, right?
Yeah, it's a BBC film. It's about this guy, Sam Hauser, who's played by Daniel Radcliffe. He started this phenomenal game, Grand Theft Auto, but it came under a lot of scrutiny because it was being sold to kids who weren't, and it's an adult game. I play a guy named Jack Thompson, a real guy who took a Miami lawyer who took not only Rockstar Games but also Sony into a huge multi-million-dollar lawsuit over a kid that killed some cops down in Alabama and said he'd been playing the game.
You love the diversity, right, that you've had.
You know, Larry, you're trying to stay current, you're trying to stay relevant, you're trying to find interesting stuff, and this was a really good script.
Well, it comes your way, doesn't it? You're always working. I mean, you'd have the looks of a leading man. You've never been a star.
That's true.
But you're everywhere.
Yeah. I kind of work under the radar, you know. But it's an accumulative thing.
You're doing a thriller with Vince Vaughn.
Got a movie called Term Life with Term Life. I guess it's an insurance term, and he's trying to protect his daughter Haley Steinfeld, the gal from True Grit, and I'm a vice cop who's pretty bad news, who's out to get him.
And you're going to direct a new movie called The Bottoms.
The Bottoms has teamed me up with a great author, a Southern author named Joe Lansdale. And I got Brent Hanley, who wrote Frailty, to write it, but I'm looking for my leading man so I can get my movie green-lit. You know, it's that whole dance.
Do you like directing as much?
I like directing more. I'm a better director.
Than actor?
Oh, yes.
How so?
You know, for me, directing is a chance to play every part. And I like leadership positions, like playing Sam Houston. As an actor, I feel isolated most of the time. I feel like I don't have a voice where I'd like to have one. You know, weirdly enough, I force myself to be an actor.
Are you easily directed?
Yes, I love direction. Please give me direction. You know, I find that a lot of directors don't direct the actors. They maybe come into it from photography or writing, and they just don't have that skill set. So I'm always delighted when I have a director who actually is giving me some direction, because I can bring an interpretation to the role, but I need someone watching it to help me adjust it.
Of all you've done, was Big Love challenging?
Big Love was a huge challenge. 5 years on the show, the only steady job I've ever had since I was probably in my early 20s. It was, you know, I literally had to kind of live kind of a monk's life. We shot most of it up in Santa Clarita, and I would stay up at the Hyatt up there because it would save me an hour going home and an hour back in the morning, because I had about 7 pages to learn every night. And, you know, you have these supporting actors. You have people like Bruce Dern and Grace Zabriskie and Sissy Spacek, Alan Burstyn, these people coming in, and they're ready to go. They're only working maybe a day or two out of the week, and you're in there every day, and you got to be ready to go.
Did you get much havoc from the Mormon community?
No.
You did not?
I never felt anything. I don't really go on the internet that much. I mean, I use the internet, but I don't look for comments and things. Years ago, I remember I did an online interview for the last episode of Big Love, and I went ahead to look to see how the interview came out, and then I saw underneath it said comments. I thought, comments? What the hell are comments on an interview? What the hell is that? And I made the mistake of going on and reading what people say about you. It's just, God, it's just soul destroying what people, you know.
They rapped you?
Well, I was talking about I wanted to go back into the movie business, and people were saying stuff like, oh, yeah, like your movie career is so hot. Well, when was Twister, 20 years ago? You know, I mean, people just, God, they just sharpen up the knives. All I'm doing is trying to be an entertainer, be a storyteller, be the best actor or director I can be. But, God, you just open yourself up to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
Up next, what historical event did Bill witness as a child? And the answer may shock you. It'll shock me because I don't know what it is. We're back with one of my favorite people, the very talented Bill Paxton. He stars in Texas Rising. It airs Mondays at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on the History Network. Oh, you saw John Kennedy speak? Where?
I saw John Kennedy give his last public speech in front of the Hotel Texas on the morning of November 22nd, 1963. I was
in Fort Worth.
In Fort Worth, Texas. I was eight years old. We had seen from where we lived, we could see with my brother's telescope, we could see Carswell Air Force Base. And the night before, we could see Air Force One down there because we could see the tail with the presidential seal. So the next morning, it was my older brother, Bob. He was 11, I was 8. He woke my dad up and said, you promised you'd take us to see the president. My dad looked outside. It was kind of a drizzly, rainy morning. And he liked Kennedy, but he thought of the idea of taking these boys into a big crowd in the rain, trying to see this guy. But then my brother said, you promised. So he said, get your brother dressed. And 10 minutes later, we were driving down to downtown Fort Worth. We parked near St. Patrick's Cathedral. We walked in. We became part of a crowd of about 4,000 people. And about 20 minutes later, here comes Kennedy with Connolly and Johnson and Yarborough. The whole crew is coming out. Jackie was not with them. The first thing he said, I'm sorry Jackie's not here to greet you good people. She takes a little longer to get ready in the morning, but of course she looks a lot better. And the crowd was just ebullient, really laughing. And I remember the excitement.
That morning, and then he flew to Dallas. Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
it's his history.
You were born in Fort Worth, right?
Born and raised, yeah.
That's something. You never forget that.
No, you don't.
We'll play a bunch of quick questions for you. Okay. What's your most memorable on-screen kiss?
Boy, I'm trying to think if it was with a woman or a man.
Yes, you had both.
Oh gosh, I've kissed a lot of.
I was kissed by Brando.
Oh well, that's.
Can't stop thinking about it.
I can't top that.
Okay, a co-star you learned the most from?
Years ago, working with Lance Henriksen on Aliens, he had quite a process. He'd go out and spend just all the money he had trying to figure out physically what the character looked like. And
Who did he play?
He played Bishop in Aliens. He played the android. And then we got to do a great movie, an early Catherine Bigelow picture about a year later called Near Dark. And again, God, he went to some place and he had all these nails. We were playing vampires, so he had these nails glued on. And then he went home and took pliers and broke them off. He was quite a character. He's a great actor.
Director you learned the most from?
It's funny when you say you learn the most. To me, I think about directors that gave me the most confidence.
Who was that?
I'd have to say John Hughes, when I did Weird Science. That was the first movie I really got real notices from. That led to me getting cast in Aliens. Jim wanted to use me, and Scott Rudin was the casting director at Fox. My name came up, but John just gave me great confidence.
Is there a movie you turned down you wish you hadn't?
There's movies I came very close to getting. I know that I was up right down to the wire with Gary Sinise to play Lieutenant Dan. And that was one I always wanted to play. But things I turned down, Forrest Gump, yeah.
Did you turn down anything you started?
I've turned down a couple of things, but no, I can't really think of anything that was that significant.
Most challenging role?
I'd say playing Bill Henriksen on Big Love. That was just a constant challenge because I had to be this kind of almost a crisis control manager with those 3 wives.
Favorite role to date?
I think playing the part of Hank opposite Billy Bob's Jacob in a movie called A Simple Plan.
That was
a great thriller.
Yeah.
Great kind of gothic thriller. Sam Raimi, another great director. I really, really enjoyed it.
I remember them. Your character in Apollo 13 vomits in space. Did you work on an anti-gravity set to make you nauseous in real life?
We did those flights on this old 707 they call the Vomit Comet. It goes up to 39,000 feet, and then they do these parabolic arches. They pull that yoke up, and then you go over the top, and for about 30 seconds, you're falling. It's not real. It's weightless because you're falling and compensating with the Earth's gravity.
That's what astronauts train with.
Exactly. So we shot those scenes. They built NASA allowed us to build part of the lunar module and part of the command module, and cram it into the space that they use to train these astronauts. And we would practice on the ground because after 30 seconds, you had to find a safe place to take the when you came out of the dive, you'd practically triple your own body weight. And if you were standing up, it felt like you were growing gills because you're taking it all right through your body that way. So they would recommend you lay down horizontally and take the G's that way. But the vomit scene, I had a little thermos the prop man had made me, and it had some Van de Kamp's beef stew in it. So we had to get up. I had to get some in my mouth and then put that away. And then we started rolling. Then I started throwing up. But I have to say, it quite literally primed the pump. I had a cameraman also vomit. A cloud of vomit is the weirdest thing because up there things stay together. And so I looked over and it was like a comic strip, except it was vomit coming out like a cloud from this cameraman. And Tom was right there, and he kind of looked up, and then I hear the guy yell 30 down, and it just hits me like a sheet of glass. And all I could do was take a towel and just try to get it off the best I could.
Was that your toughest shoot?
I wouldn't say it was the toughest. I'd say that was the most exhilarating. Because here we were actually doing something that nobody had ever tried to do, to shoot a set with actors falling out of the sky in this plane. And it's, you know, everything's just about, you can imagine, has been tried in movies. And
Ron Howard, good guy to work with?
the greatest.
Great guy.
He should have been nominated for Best Director.
Yeah. Coming up, I'm going to ask Bill some of your fan questions from social media. We'll be right back. We're back with Bill Paxton. The series is Texas Rising on the History Channel. We got some social media. Mo the Man on LKN blog. You work with some of the greatest filmmakers of all time. What young director working today are you excited about?
Well, on this BBC film, I just worked with a young British director named Owen Harris. I thought he was outstanding.
Two from Graham Hart on Twitter. Any stories from filming Streets of Fire?
Streets of Fire, okay. That was Walter Hill, and that was probably the second big feature I was involved with. We shot that on the back lot over a summer at Universal, and they had an old New York street, and they literally blacked the whole street in with Dubatine black curtains, which was, I think, a huge cost, so that they could, because most of the picture took place at night, so they could shoot it day for night.
Did you eat any of the PCP spiked clam chowder from the set of Titanic, and did they ever catch the person responsible?
Yeah, that's kind of a crazy story. I remember I shot the first couple weeks of Titanic. What Jim did, he had me and Gloria Stewart and Susie Amos. We were all up in Halifax, Nova Scotia. We were shooting on the Keldysh, which is the Russian research vessel that had the two Mir subs that Jim had taken down to Titanic to shoot some footage that he used in the film. While we were shooting that, they were building the big set down in Rosarita Beach. One night, we were shooting splits. We would go in around 5 o'clock, and so we would take our dinner at midnight, and then we'd work till dawn. And I didn't care for the caterer much, so I was ordering my meals in, but I was having a good conversation with Jim Cameron on the set. And I said, Jim, are you going to eat off the truck tonight? He said, yeah. I said, well, I'll join you. So we ladled up the clam chowder, not knowing it was laced with PCP. And I don't know who did it or why, but I remember going back to my trailer after lunch, and Jim went up to his office. And I heard a commotion, and I opened up my door, and I saw a couple of ambulances pulling in, and then an AD ran up and said, are you feeling okay? And I was like, well, I think I'm shooting all night. I'm feeling about as good as you can feel. And he said, well, did you eat the clam chowder? And I thought, well, yeah, I had a couple of bowls. And about that time, I started feeling it. Now I'm starting to witness some bizarre behavior with the crew and stuff. and they take us very close by. We were on the Dartmouth side of Halifax Bay. And so all of a sudden, here's 150 crew members stumbling into the emergency room of a very small hospital at 1 o'clock in the morning. You see some people are freaking out, some people are Congo dancing, some people are euphoric. I knew I was pretty stoned on something pretty bad, and I thought, me and Jim thought that there was a neurotoxin in the clams. We didn't know what it was. We thought maybe the clams had been left out in the sun or whatever. But I figured, while they examine all these other 100 people, I said to Jim, Jim, I'm not going to hang out here. This is bedlam. I'm gonna wander, because it was only a few blocks from the set. I'm gonna wander back down and just drink a case of beer, which is what I did. And, that seemed to help me.
That's Serena Goddess on the LKN blog. You've done several movies that are heavy on computer graphics: Apollo 13, Titanic, Twister. Which film blew you away when you sat down to watch it?
Well, all three of those were pretty amazing. I tell you, probably Mighty Joe Young, because that literally, the
gorilla.
The remake. I played the Ben Johnson part, and Charlize Theron, it was her first studio film. She played the Terry Moore part. And we had, well, Ben had passed on, but Terry Moore came down the set, but there was never anything hardly to refer to. Once in a while they had, Rick Baker was doing some of the, the animatronics with the giant ape. But until I saw the movie, like I'm hanging on the side of a Ferris wheel and I'm supposed to be reacting as Joe climbs up this Ferris wheel to save the kid who's up in the bucket at the top, and then the whole thing collapses. But when I saw it put together, it was amazing how they brought that creature to life through computer graphics.
Lisa Philippe on the LKN blog. How did your guest arc on Marvel's Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. come out?
I think it came out okay. I got offered that, and I just thought it'd be fun to do a comic book thing. Yeah.
Oh, Chris Cobb on Facebook. When's the Big Love movie coming?
Well, it'd have to be a prequel because, my character meets an early demise there, but I would love to do a movie, a Big Love movie. I had so much fun working with Jean Tripplehorn, Chloe Sevigny, and Jennifer Goodwin on that series.
Jonathan Levine on Twitter. What's it like working with James Cameron?
You better make sure your life insurance policy is paid up. Because he's going to test you to the limit and get you
Smart as hell, though.
Oh, I love Jim. Jim's the most loyal guy I ever met in Hollywood. And the most talented.
Scott Steinheim on Twitter. Any talks of a Twister sequel?
I was promoting that a few years ago. I always felt like we left a lot on the table.
Really?
Yeah, I always thought there was a kind of a Jaws version of that movie, a little bit of a darker, even more suspenseful version, and. But I guess now it's been 20 years, so Helen and I think we'd have to have a teenage daughter who's run off with a college guy and they're out storm chasing. I don't know. I have to do something.
Great having you.
Thanks so much. Real pleasure, Larry.
I want to thank my guest, Bill Paxton. Texas Rising airs Mondays at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on History, and you can find me on Twitter at King's Things. See you next time.